All right, ratings agency Fitch has affirmed South Africa's investment grade credit rating one notch above the so-called junk status, but it has changed our outlook to negative from stable. Fitch saying in a statement that South Africa may have started to recover, but political risk remains. Well, let's get straight now to Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has agreed to join us on the line. Minister, thank you for joining us. Your reaction to what Fitch is saying and what do you expect from Moody's, also expected tonight?
Good evening to you and good evening to our viewers. I think the important message, as you say, is, if you put it correctly, we remain in investment grade. Don't worry about junk right now. And that's the important message that Africans must take from the Fitch announcement. Secondly, what we have is this excellent result as a result of the collective efforts of a huge number of South Africans in different constituencies, government, labor, business, civil society, the faith community, and all of them must take credit for and be acknowledged for their efforts as well. Because keeping South Africa on investment grade means that all South Africans don't have to suffer the consequences of paying higher rates for borrowing and so on. Secondly, I think what is important about this report is that it acknowledges that government made all the right decisions in the medium-term budget. Whether it was about keeping the deficit under control, acknowledging that we need to manage our debt until we grow our economy, managing the fees earlier in the year and absorbing it into government expenditure. And importantly, they acknowledge that the way we borrow money is largely in rand. Over 90% of our borrowing is in rand. Just less than 10% of our borrowing is in foreign currency. And importantly, maturity of these bonds, that is when we are required to pay these debts, is 14 years down the line. So that's where we've done excellently as government as well. But the key factor, as you correctly point out, is how do we grow the economy? How do we grow it so that every South African amongst the 55 million benefit, young people have jobs and opportunities, and how do we collectively contribute to creating the right kind of confidence in our country to get both internal investment and investment from elsewhere in the world that will help us to create the jobs and the enterprises that we actually require. So the risks are there, as you point out, whether it's political, the debt issue. But one of the issues I think that Fitch doesn't quite get it right is when they say there's uncertainty about economic policy. No economic policy has changed as a result of our politics. We are busy implementing whatever we can, both in government and in the private sector as well. But clearly, we need to do more work, keep our focus and our united efforts while we go through turbulent times, which many countries in the world are doing as well. So overall, I think South Africans should be extremely pleased, as we are. As far as Moody's is concerned, they come out with their report later tonight. It's New York closing time. And all I can say to South Africans that are watching your show on your news is that the team South Africa has put on a formidable case to all of the ratings agencies, and we remain optimistic that even Moody's will go in this direction, but we don't know yet.
Minister, looking at the Fitch statement, that's all we have. It talks about political risk quite a lot. We've seen that rhetoric being upped over recent months. Are you disappointed with that? That again, it seems like this is something within our control as a country.
I think what we must understand as South Africa is that whilst we think that when you're in a house of your own, and you have a lot of people there being rowdy, you think that's the rowdiest house in the street until you go outside. So when we attend international meetings of the G20, IMF, World Bank, excuse me, we actually see that there's a shift in the world today. Firstly, leaders all over the world acknowledge that there's a link between politics and economics, and political decision-making and economic policy-making as well. But in our case, as I said, no economic policy has changed. Secondly, every country in the world has political phenomena of our kind and of different kinds. Use Brexit as an example. Use the situation in Brazil where they've had turbulence in recession for 2 years, and many other developing countries. The recent U.S. elections will usher in a new period. That's 25% of the global economy. And their politics and their economic decision-making might influence the world in a very different way in the next 6 months. So the key message internationally is that we live in both political and economic uncertain times. Coming back to South Africa, we know that there are ANC elections next year. We've told the ratings agencies that. And there will be debate, and there will be more robustness in that debate as we go forward. Our job collectively is to keep the economic ship afloat and make sure we keep it in the right direction as a collective, and do the right things by the 55 million people that we serve.
Minister, you say no economic policy is changing. Of course, debt is a concern, and especially the state-owned entities. So I'd really like to ask you, because a more recent development is Brian Molefe's resignation at Eskom. Do you think that will play a role in how SOEs and therefore how we are assessed?
Well, SOEs have been a concern in government and outside. We've said it publicly. Some are run well, and some boards and management teams need to reflect very carefully on the decisions that they make. But recently, Cabinet has approved about 5 or 6 policies which act as a new policy foundation and framework for shareholder compacts, appointments of boards, financial management, the cost of the development mandate, and this, from next year onwards, becomes the policy framework and directive to every single state-owned entity. Secondly, we've said very openly that there are some that are run well, relatively speaking, like Transnet. There are others that need to look in the mirror and ask themselves, am I doing the right thing for the country, not for any particular sector? But we've said we don't want any fiscal risk, meaning anything that they do that affects the fiscal balances that we are trying to maintain at this point in time. And government as a whole will ensure that that begins to happen. It's going to be a process. I'm not going to say it's going to happen overnight, but at least now we have a clear framework within which all of these SOEs should operate.
Minister, your response, the President just a few days ago saying that we are politicizing these rating reviews, and this has been something that has been taken seriously by Treasury. What's your response to what he was saying?
Well, all over the world, as I said, because of the link between politics and economic policy making, you look at any of the ratings agencies and their reports on countries, the political part has become quite a significant part of their observations, whether it's, as I said earlier on, whether it's Brexit or anything else. So we must become more aware as South Africans that politics now is a key consideration. But remember that we do all of this not just for ratings agencies. We do require higher growth in South Africa. We do require greater inclusivity. That means benefits must go to all South Africans. And America, for example, and elsewhere, the inequality results in funny politics. Watch what's going to be happening in different parts of Europe as they go into elections next year, and which spectrum, political or which part of the political spectrum elections begin to go in. If people become disenchanted and they believe that you can have a nice GDP number, but if it's only the elite that benefits from the GDP number, and you leave the majority behind, which is happening in many parts of the world, resulting in inequality, then we will make a mistake. So to sum it up, politics has become a more prominent factor around the world. It has become a more prominent factor for ratings agencies. But the key for us now is to do what's right by this country, do everything possible to grow the economy, grow jobs, reduce inequality, and reduce poverty.
Minister, in finality then, before we let you go, do you mind making this very clear for South Africans in rands and cents? Because it does have a monetary impact. We won't know until next week if we've avoided junk. But if we are moved into junk status, what does that mean for the budget? Often we talk about this 12 cents in 1 rand already going towards our debt costs.
Well, yeah, that's a very important question, and thank you very much for asking that and giving me this opportunity. What it means is that when we borrow as government, we borrow, for example, say at 7 or 8%, we raised 3 billion rands on behalf of government a couple of weeks ago at quite a cheap rate. If we are put into junk territory, that means, let's say the 8 or 7% becomes 10 or 11%. Secondly, big companies in South Africa borrow overseas in dollars or euros. Excuse me, their borrowing costs, assume it's 10%, can jump higher. Thirdly, SOEs borrow overseas. Municipalities borrow overseas, like Swane, Johannesburg, Cape Town. All of their costs will go up. What are they going to do, all of them, with these costs? They begin to pass them down the line. So next time you go for a loan for a house, for example, the interest you will pay is higher. Prices for ordinary people, working people, middle-class people, will actually go higher as well. So this is not just about business, nor is it just about government. It's about all of us as citizens. It impacts on us, as you correctly point out, in rands and cents. And the bottom line is it will increase the costs incurred by every family, every small business, every big business. And that is why we made this a national effort of business, labor, government, civil society, the faith community, and many others. And I think we should all thank all of these constituencies for coming to the party, being part of this very important partnership, which in the new year we will continue to build on, continue to represent all of South Africa's interests, and ensure that we remain in the right territory so that all of us benefit from it.
All right, thank you very much. We'll let you go. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. Over to you, Peter.